So for those who are here for the first time, make yourself comfortable, and I suggest that you close your eyes. Contemplate whatever presents itself through your senses or through thoughts and images in your mind from moment to moment. Without any reference to what you know, without commenting or reaching conclusions, without reference to the past or to the future. It's an experiment. It's not the way we are supposed to live our lives 24/7. It's just an experiment we are conducting from 12 to 12:45 or whatever your time zone is, 45 minutes from now. During these 45 minutes or these 40 minutes, you don't have to do anything special. Everything you needed to do has been done or can be postponed, has been postponed. Everything you really needed to think of urgently has been thought of or has been postponed. So during this artificial experiment, you have the luxury of having nothing to do, nothing to think about. As a result, you can be simply open to whatever presents itself in the moment. They can be thoughts, ideas, feelings, whatever, perceptions, sounds, whatever arises, just welcome it in and see it off as it leaves. Like someone standing by a river on the bank, watching the flow, watching the water flowing and whatever it carries, fish, floating pieces of wood, bubbles. The flow flows by itself. neither make it flow, nor can you prevent it flowing. See that it has always been the case. That whenever you thought you could interfere with the flow, this interfering thought or action was part of the flow. It is only through an act of imagination that you separate the interfering decision or interfering thought or the interfering action from the flow on which it is supposed to act or with which it is supposed to interfere. When we understand that it is part of the flow, we understand that its alleged interference with the flow was just a product of our imagination, that it was not real. There has only been the flow, always. And there always will be only the flow. No controller of the flow has ever existed. The flow controls itself, and the flow contemplates itself. Because just as the controller of the flow is part of the flow, the perceiver of the flow, the beholder of the flow, is not separate from the flow. For if it were to be separate, how could it possibly perceive the flow? Perception requires contact somehow. Perception requires interaction. So perception requires a connection, a continuity between the flow which is perceived and the perceiver of the flow. It is only after the fact that this distinction between the perceiver of the flow and the flow arises as one more perception in the flow. But at the time when the flow is perceived, there was no separation between the perceiver of the flow and the flow. So this separation has never existed. So just as the controller of the flow has never existed, the beholder of the flow, as separate from the flow, has never existed. The beholder of the flow and the flow are one. The beholder is part of the flow. If what I'm saying makes sense as you hear it, see what happens. Because as that which I am saying makes sense as you hear it, and by make sense I mean is verified experientially by you, is found by you to be a true description of your experience. Then what happens is meditation. At that moment when the beholder of the flow meets the flow, that's meditation. The beholder of the flow knows itself as the flow. The flow is eternal. The flow has no borders, no limits in time or space. The flow is free. Don't try to manipulate what happens when you understand the oneness of the flow. Because then you separate yourself again. You create an alleged manipulator of the flow. Which is, of course, a creation of the flow, and which has no existence separate from the flow. So that its reality, the real manipulator, the real beholder, the real controller of the flow is the flow itself, is the reality of the flow. That which creates the flow, that which makes the flow flow, is also that which beholds the flow. Just don't recreate the separate beholder, the separate controller, the separate manipulator. Simply know their inexistence. So that they cannot come back to the surface. your understanding of their non-existence whacks them if they come to the surface. So the state of meditation, or the meditation can flow continuously. Without a meditator, without a controller, without a beholder. The flow, only the flow, nothing but the flow. No separation between you and the flow. No separation. There is a Chinese poem that says, a tiny separation, as wide as a hairline, and earth and heavens are born. I would say, and hell is born. No separation means peace, absence of voice, certainty. Truth. Harmony. The mind relaxes in this openness, and so does the body. The power of truth heals the wounds of separation. Everything finds its right place. Body and mind merge together. And as the body and the mind merge, observe the world. See that there is no separation between your body as an experience and the world as an experience. in this moment, not conceptually, but experientially in this moment. See that there is only one experience, experiencing itself. And see that what is true now is always true and has always been true.